What are your wishes regarding item 9? It's a motion by Alderman Scannell. Second by Alderman Stevens. Alderman Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, my only comment is that I would like this displayed, the vote on this item. Thanks.
All right, will do. Yep, Alderman Vanderleest. Just click your light. I'll be right there. Alderman Vanderleest.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that the request was made to change the ordinance from $1,000 to $500. I talked to the district attorney and to the sheriff, and they weren't in harmony with this. They think of it as a tool, and as a deterrent. And I don't know why the city of Green Bay is, moving forward when they're really not in conjunction with the district attorney or the sheriff. I don't think Chief Smith has signed in on, what he feels. But I think Green Bay does have a drug and alcohol problem. I think that reducing the fines, I don't think there's any real merit to it. The police department and the sheriff's department, they don't always give a fine of $1,000. They use their discretion. In some cases, they would like to have a heftier fine. And I think that I'm going to follow suit with the sheriff and the district attorney. And as far as I think that we're sending the wrong message here in the community, and that's my thoughts on that.
All right, thank you.
I will not support number 9. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. What are all the changes to this ordinance or policy?
Let me do that. You want to do that? Why don't I have the city attorney?
Thank you.
So, in general, it basically reduces the penalties for marijuana possession under 28 grams. It lowers the fine amount from $1,000 to $500 for possession in public, to $250 for possession in a private residence. It removes the requirement that a municipal citation has to be referred for criminal charges after the first offense. It removes the penalty of suspension of a driver's license and instead puts in community service in lieu of or conjunction with a fine as a penalty.
Okay. So what's the purpose of this?
Just to basically lessen the severity of the fines and the penalties while still
And is there any
keeping
logic behind this that it will do what?
Essentially, it just lessens the burden, the financial burden of individuals.
I mean, will this deter more people?
I think the deterrence would still be the same. I would maybe defer to the police department for input on that. But essentially, it's just decriminalizing, not legalizing in any way. It's still a crime in the state of Wisconsin, so it's not legalizing. It's just lessening the severity of the fines.
Out of the $1,000 right now, what does that cover? Court costs?
That is not court costs, so that's just the ticket amount, correct. Court costs always get added on if the citation is objected to.
Okay, what does the $1,000 cover then?
It's just revenue. It doesn't necessarily cover any expense. Correct.
Revenue to...
It's just a penalty.
Okay. So it's revenue to the city?
I believe it goes to Muni Court.
It goes right to Judge Hansen's budget?
Correct.
Okay. And then he utilizes that revenue to what he believes should be spent then?
Correct.
Okay. Like what, salaries?
I'm not sure what his constraints are.
Does he have witness protection? Does he have...
I don't believe he has witness protection.
His budget's in the book, but...
Right.
Well, I'd like to have it stated for the record. I know it's in the book.
I'm not sure how that gets divvied up in his budget.
Okay. Is Judge Hansen here?
I don't see him.
Okay. All right, and then you mentioned something about driver's license. Can you
Yes, so.
expand on that, please?
Right, so currently, in the current ordinance, license suspension is a potential penalty. However, in checking with the prosecutor and with the municipal court clerk, it's never issued.
It's never issued?
Nope,
Okay. So basically the judge
not for
can...
this, anyway.
Okay. So, I mean, basically the judge can use it for discretionary
Correct.
purposes? Okay. And this is basically less than 28 grams, nothing above 28 grams.
Correct.
And then what does it do on the second violation?
So right now, the way that it's currently set up, a second violation for less than 25 grams automatically gets referred for criminal charges. So you can
Okay.
only get one municipal citation for possession. With the changes implemented as proposed, it would be up to the discretion of the arresting officer whether to refer those charges to criminal court or whether to issue the person or the offender another municipal citation.
Okay. So basically, what does the police department, what do they utilize out of the, this violation right now? I mean, basically, do they write the citations right to $1,000?
My understanding is that they typically do not max out the penalty. I think it hovers around, I don't know the exact number, but I think it usually is around $600 plus court costs.
$600. Okay. And then with the second violation, what are the penalties to the second violation right now?
So a
Before the
second
changes.
violation would be referred to the district attorney's office to charge for criminal.
And then this will eliminate it if we have the
Correct.
change.
Right. They could still be referred for criminal charges, but it's up to the discretion of the officer.
It's up to
whether
the
it being
officer.
right instead of it being an automatic referral.
Okay. Can the judge, the municipal judge right now, if during the change, if there is a change to this particular issue, can he issue it right to the DA's office? Does he have that discretion?
I do not believe the judge would. It would be up to the municipal prosecutor or the officer at the time of writing the ticket.
Okay, the prosecutor of the officer.
Once it's in front of the
Okay.
judge, the judge.
So there's someone in authority that could.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right,
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Anything else? Good? All right.
I'm good right now, Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go to Alderman Galvin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm in favor of parts of this change, but I'm not in favor of other parts. I don't have an issue lowering the maximum down to $500. When you consider with the cost, a guy making $15 an hour, that's an entire week's worth of wages, and that's pretty hard for an individual to lose a week's worth of wages for a citation like that. I have no problem taking out the driving restriction. We don't always know who the judge is going to be, and if we got a judge in there that start taking away people's means of getting to work, again, it reduces their ability to support themselves and pay off the fine. The $250 in the residence, I can't agree with that. I went into too many homes when I was on the job where there were children present that were subjected to secondhand smoke from marijuana. There's plenty of stories in the paper about children coming in contact with these products, and I understand there's other charges for that, but I think we need to treat it the same in the home as we do on the street. Hopefully the state will, in the near future, make some decisions on this, especially as it relates to medical marijuana. But until then, I don't think we should be reducing it to the point where it's almost why have it. And so I'm not going to support this ordinance as it's listed right now. And I'd be willing to make an amendment to take it up to $500 so it matches what it is if they were caught with it on the street.
All right. So we have a motion by Alderman Galvin, second by Alderman Scannell, to amend ordinance 20-17 by taking the private fine equal to the public fine, which is $500, whether you're caught in public or in private. Right?
Yes.
So we're going to discuss that amendment right now, and then we're going to vote on it, and then we'll get back to the ordinance. So I know there's a couple of you that wanted to speak. Does anybody want to speak to this amendment? Alderman Scannell? Go ahead.
I know there are people here who would like to speak on this, and I think maybe now would be a good time to open the floor so we can hear what they think about the amendment too.
For interested parties.
Okay, so we have motion by Alderman Nicholson, second by Alderman Stoyer to open the floor to hear from interested parties. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nays. Ayes have it. The floor is open. Why is there so much feedback? The floor is now open to hear from the public. We're discussing General Ordinance 27-18, which is amending 27.902, Parent 2 of the Green Bay Municipal Code, replacing penalties for marijuana possession, previously discussed at the October 8th Protection and Policy Committee. If anyone wants to speak to this, you can hold your remarks 3 minutes. We'd appreciate that. Go ahead.
Well, good evening. My name is Don Radford, 408 South Van Buren Street, Apartment 1, Green Bay, of course. And I'd like to thank the council for taking this matter up. I think it's long overdue, and however this goes tonight, I'm just glad we're thinking about it and giving it some serious thought. You know, we have a philosophy in this country, at least I grew up with, that the punishment must fit the crime. You know, this just appeals to, I think, the average citizen's sense of fair play. Now, not only do many people think this is no longer as severe of a crime, but there are many who say it should just no longer be a crime. I wish the election had been the day before this, so I could give you firm numbers. It's going to have to wait till tomorrow, I'm afraid. Now, some people do say the penalties must be severe, very severe. For the people I hear talking that way, I get the impression I'm hearing from people who would cheerfully prescribe a death penalty for parking violations. I just cannot take them seriously. As for the notion that this sends a message, it certainly does send a message. It sends a message that the leadership of this city has a grasp upon reason. You know, when we hear propaganda from people like at the top of the Justice Department saying that marijuana is worse than heroin, which is laughable, their credibility suffers, and that incredibility leaches from the head down. Taints entire organizations. It erodes public trust and the respect we have for these organizations, most notably law enforcement, who everybody kind of, is face to face with on it. Anyway, I do encourage you to approve the decriminalization measure as it was brought here, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this?
Wendy Coriel, 1473 Grignon Street. Good evening. I'm an IT professional, and I'm here to speak in favor of decriminalization of cannabis. While I think reduced fines and lack of jail time is a good start, I'd actually like to see you go further. I'd like to see the fine for possessing 28 grams or less to be a $0 fine, like Minocqua has, regardless of where the possession takes place. As some of you know, I have MS, which is a neurological disorder that destroys the myelin sheath of the nerves and spinal cord. The MS Society supports a patient's right to use cannabis in legal states, but since we don't have one of those yet, it's up to the Green Bay City Council to protect people like me for suffering negative consequences for trying to reduce our suffering. $0 fines for cannabis also make sense recreationally, considering the fact we live in the drunkest city in the U.S. I lost my first stepfather to alcoholism when he died from having a grand mal seizure due to withdrawals. And alcohol played a role in my second stepfather's nearly losing his life. Cannabis, on the other hand, has never taken a life. Maybe it's time to give people a choice to make their own adult decisions in this matter. I hope one of you throws out an amendment to bring the fine down to $0 for debate and vote. I'd at least like to see the debate on a $0 fine. If nothing else comes of it, I'd at least like to hear you debate it. That'd be pretty cool. I know that you have a budget tonight, so I really do thank you for taking this up this evening.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this general ordinance 27-18? Anyone else?
Motion to return to the regular order of business.
All right, there's a motion by Alderman Nicholson, second by Alderperson LaFave to return to regular order of business. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, ayes have it. We're back in regular session. And Alderman Scannell, you had the floor.
So, yes, about the amendment, I'm fine with the amendment. I don't, for me, the fine always was whatever was going to work for everyone would be fine with me. If staff would have said and Judge Hanson and the police chief would have said it needs to be 1,000, I would have stayed with 1,000. If they'd have said it could go to 0 or 100, my sister. I would have gone with that. So we came up with 500, and it was actually during committee and talking with the public that they suggested that we look at, I forget which municipality had a separate fine, a lesser fine for in the home, and we looked at that, and so we thought, well, we'll put it in and see where it goes. But for me, that the fine is really the last piece of the puzzle that I'm concerned with. It's much more the others. So if the council feels that it's necessary to raise the fine to 500 for within the home, I certainly would support that too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Nicholson, I just want to note that the judge is in the house now. If you,
Thank you.
all right, we'll go to Alderman Galvin.
Your Honor, I just wanted to say, too, that I was contacted by some residents within my district, a total of 3 households, totaling 3 people that were against or that were for decriminalization, Wendy being one of them, and then 2 that were against. So out of all the information that has been out there, that's all I've been contacted on this issue. Thank you.
All right. Alderman Vanderleest, did you want to comment on the amendment?
I just want to mention one thing, that to bring the council aware that if the city of Green Bay changes this ordinance, all our surrounding Brown County municipalities, Denmark, Pulaski, they're going to be on the old system rather than the current system that we have right now. It does send a message that, Green Bay is not, in other words, it's okay in Green Bay, but not in these other communities. So myself, I feel that I don't want to change what's going on right now in Brown County. Green Bay is a big part of Brown County, and all the other municipalities are as well. So I just want council to be aware of that.
All right. So the amendment on the floor is amending General Ordinance 27-18 to increasing the fine for private use to the same as public use, so from $250 to $500. So we're going to vote on that amendment to see how that goes, and then we're going to go back to the General Ordinance. So if you want to use the board here, a yes vote increases the fine from, or rearranges the fine.
Do you have me registered at all?
I do.
Thank you.
No, you're not on there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, at a committee, it went to $250, and the motion is $500 just for marijuana seen in the house?
So it would be if an officer enters the home and finds marijuana under 28 grams, with the amendment, the maximum fine would be $500 plus costs. Prior to that, the proposal was $250 plus costs.
Right. That was...
Outside the home, it was for $500 plus costs. I just wanted the 2 to match.
But I thought it was $1,000 when this first started.
Right now, it currently is $1,000 plus cost.
In the house and on the street?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was also for 25 grams, not 28.
Right. Now, why 500 bill? Why are you...
In my opinion, the average guy out there working is making $15-20 an hour. A $500 fine plus cost is over $800. That's a week's worth of wages before anything's taken out of it. To me, that's a pretty stiff fine for a guy that's just trying to, make a living and support himself. And I don't want to put anyone in a position where they lose their home or they lose their apartment or something because they have to pay these fines.
Okay. I guess, Mayor, I disagree with this. I got law enforcement background. I saw numerous times, marijuana, other drugs, but let's just stick to marijuana. I mean, really ask yourself, you have marijuana in your house, which is an illegal drug, and you have your children see you using it. To me, that's not a responsible parent. I can't even fathom my parents having any marijuana in the house. I can't fathom my kids looking at me, ex-officer, having marijuana in the house. It's a illegal substance. Now, if it's legal, that's a different story, but it's illegal. I can't comprehend this. I think it's irresponsible to have an illegal substance in a house with children or teenagers or even young 20-year-old children or young adults that you're trying to raise. This shows irresponsibility. I just don't understand this. I don't see how this is accomplishing anything. Actually, I like to see the fines even higher. But like I said, that's my opinion. I come from a law enforcement background. I'm not going to support this unless this is a legal substance, but it's illegal. Please ask yourself, Mayor, Alderman, Alderwomen, really? I have marijuana in the house and I'm going to let my kids see me smoke an illegal substance. The difference between this and alcohol is legal. Marijuana is not. And that's the issue I cannot get past. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Do you understand it's still illegal? It's just the fine. Okay. Okay. All right. So, Brian, Alderman Johnson.
I'm not going to support this amendment. And look, I'm not here to debate whether or not the use of this is illegal. We know it's illegal. That's not the issue. The issue here is, does the penalty fit the crime? You know what? Speeding is illegal. We don't give out $1,000 penalties for speeding. I mean, and I tell you what, I'd argue that speeding is far more dangerous to the residents in our community, far more dangerous to the residents in residential neighborhoods and kids playing on streets than someone who wants to engage in something in their personal residence. I'm not going to support this because to me this isn't about an assessment and a judgment on whether or not a drug is illegal. It's an assessment about whether or not this is the appropriate penalty. We've talked about a couple of things out here. You know, I mean, the sheriff and the DA not being on the same page, that's Brown County. I'm not sure what that has to do with Green Bay. We talked about it being a deterrent. I would ask you to raise your hands. How many here knew what the penalty was before the discussion on this issue ever began? If you don't know what the penalty is, how is it a deterrent? How is it a deterrent when you don't know what the penalty is going to be? This is something that across the country, I mean, you are seeing discussions about how this is not a gateway drug. That theory has been debunked many times. This is, I mean, alcohol and tobacco kill far more people than this substance ever has. And yet we are not passing legislation to ban those things. Maybe that ought to be the next discussion then. But until that happens, I'm not going to support penalizing people beyond what's just. And that's what we heard discussed today, is what is just. And because of that, I'm not going to support the amendment. I am going to support the item when it comes back up, but that's all I got right now.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Alderman Vanderleest, are you done? Well, we're going to have to open the floor for the judge. What, Alderman Vanderleest, go ahead. The judge is here.
Thank you.
What, he's right behind you. What question do you have?
Judge Hanson,
We're here talking to your mic so we can all hear.
I'd like to have him give us a brief how it plays out as far as the cases go. He's handling all the cases. I'd like to hear what he has to say, if he's for reducing the fines or if he's not for reducing the fines.
Judge, you understand we're talking about the marijuana ordinance, and there's a couple things in the ordinance that are being proposed. One is to make the fine from $1,000 to $500 for public use and $250 in the private home. There's an amendment on the floor right now to bring the private home use of $250 parallel with the public use, so that the maximum fine the officers could issue would be $500. And the alderman's asking, I think, your opinion on
I'm
it.
okay with whatever the council proposes here. I do use discretion while I'm on the bench, depending on the person here. The bonds are set. That's really the starting point of where things happen. I mean, the officers, if they find this in the home or outside, they've got to set the fines. This is the starting point where a police officer sets that fine and just takes the bond and puts it into play where the tickets show up in front of me. Now, the other thing that happens out there is there's typically 2 tickets that go along with this. There's typically a possession charge and there's a drug paraphernalia charge. Okay, so typically it's a double whammy. So you could be talking, at your $500 plus costs, it's an $880 fine on each one of those. Okay. I think it's on the drug paraphernalia $691. So a drunk driving charge is $800 to $900 based on guidelines set by the Brown County District Court, which is consistent throughout Brown County. So if you put it in perspective, and I frequently do, I say to myself, is this similar to a drunk driving charge? So not just Alderman Johnson's speeding charge, but is it comparable? And we try to put things on a judicial side comparable to make a penalty that's comparable. So frequently I look at the individual and those fines get lower. So I'm okay with it. It's being legalized throughout the U.S. It's not going to change in Wisconsin until the federal law changes. Okay, and it's just not going to happen in Wisconsin. So that's my 2 cents on it. Whatever you guys want to do is fine with me. I'll still continue to dispense justice based on what I see that comes before me.
Are you in favor of changing the ordinance?
Yeah, as I say, you typically see both tickets come at you. So really, what's coming at you is $1,760, where a first-time drunk driving charge is $900. That's to put it in perspective.
Right. Thank you. Look at the amendment. Okay. Thank you, Judge. All right. Alderman Johnson, you want to speak again on that?
Just another question.
That's fine. Hang on. Go ahead.
Judge Hanson, if an individual is pulled over and deemed under the influence of marijuana, would they be charged with the DUI?
Yeah, that's it's drugs or alcohol.
Okay.
It's impaired driving, whether it's drugs or alcohol. That's part of an OWI, sure.
So regardless of what we would do with this ordinance today, that penalty would still be in place?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Did you like, Brian?
The vote's up, so I can't turn my light on. Yeah.
Oh, take the votes off. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. My question also is for Judge Hanson. Now, when the 2 citations are issued for possession and paraphernalia, I believe you said, you as a municipal judge, you have the discretion to reduce those fines as you see just, correct?
I frequently take that into account based on what I see. Yes.
When you say frequently, is that common? If you have 2 in excess of $800?
Yeah, they're appearing before me, and I take the circumstances into account. You got to remember, for all these tickets, you've got the typical batch of tickets that come in front of you and that are issued from the police department. I see maybe at best, 20% of those. So 80% are never going to see me. They just don't show up or something. 20% will come before me.
And those who come before you,
we take a look at it and go from there.
Understand, looking at character.
Correct.
Are they repentant? So okay. Thank you.
Alderperson Dorff. on the amendment?
Thank you. I would prefer to see all the penalties lower, so I'm not going to support the amendment to raise the penalty from $250 to $500. I like the explanation that the judge gave us. It was a very good explanation, and that just makes me feel even stronger about not supporting that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alderman Stoyer, the amendment?
Thank you, Your Honor. I do support the amendment. I think that, Alderman Galvin was privy to a lot of these situations over time. I think it's important that we stay consistent, and we argued about this over a number of meetings, this entire situation, and it's still illegal. It is an illegal drug. We understand that. But I think under the circumstances, we're making a little bit of a switch here by lowering the fine a little bit. It's still illegal. It may become legal someday. But I think for now, it's still a bit of a onus on the individual. I think Judge Hansen brought up some good points. And I think it's up to the discretion of the judge as well, and the officer. We have to trust them that they'll do the right thing as well. So I'm in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Alderman Scannell, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I just want to say that oh my God, I forgot. Hang on, give me a second.
Jokes.
I got a lot here, and it's all just all of a sudden hit me.
This is on the amendment. We're going to go back to the ordinance.
Yes, okay. The amendment was part of what we were doing for reducing it was taking into consideration the medicinal use, which is usually in the home. That's why we went to a lower fine within the home. And I think to have it higher at 500, and if the judge knew it was for medicinal purposes, I think he would take that into consideration. I think I'm okay with it going up to 500 if that's what it takes to get this whole thing passed, because I think the other parts of it are far more important. And I trust our police department, I trust our judges that they will use discretion. And if someone is using medicinally, that they will be taking that into account and setting a fine accordingly. So if it's 500 straight across the board is what it needs to take to get the trick done, I'm fine with that. But that was the thinking behind reducing it for in the home. So thank you.
Thank you. You good?
No, I got one more thing.
All right. Go ahead.
So, listening to Alder Scannell, I don't want this whole thing to go away. I don't support raising it. And sometimes you vote for something that you don't support necessarily because you want the end result to be a certain way. Judge Hansen, do you take, if it's used medicinally, do you take that into consideration?
I do.
Okay. Sure. Then I'll have to think about how I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Better think pretty quick, because you're the last light. Yeah, go ahead. Alderman Galvin.
This is for Judge Hansen. How did you determine that someone walks and says, hey, it was for medicinal use?
Yeah, well, after seeing a few thousand people in front of you, you kind of get a idea on credibility. You got to use your judgment on credibility.
So it's gut?
It's gut. Yeah, and it's also so you can line things up between what the officer said and are they consistent. The more details you get, the more likely that story is true. If they're just making general comments, and from what I've seen, the very detailed comments, they get very specific, and you have a good feeling that that's happening.
All right, we don't have anything like the drug court is a circuit court program, isn't it?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Correct.
So you have no ability to refer or anything else like that in lieu of fines?
That's a circuit court judge.
If we do this with the community service, could you work that out? That maybe their community service is served at a treatment center or a counseling center?
Yeah, it's all. You could. I certainly take any recommendation that I get from an officer. If they've got that in the report, I'm trying to follow and help out the situation, because the officer in the field sometimes has a very good understanding of what will help or not. So I certainly take that into consideration.
All right, thank you.
All right. All right, so Alderman Burnett.
Last time, I promise. The question is actually for Chief Smith. Chief, when one of your officers pulls someone over for a traffic violation and they are under the influence of marijuana or some other drug, what other citations do they have issued?
When they're just under the influence or when they're in possession?
Both, I guess.
Right, so if they're in possession, they could get the citation for being in possession. If they're under the influence, they'll be arrested for OWI.
Okay, so operating while under the influence.
Yeah, well,
there's no ordinance specific to under the influence of marijuana versus alcohol.
I believe they're the same ordinance. It's all covered under the same operating while intoxicated.
So technically, a person could get 3 citations to appear before a municipal court under the influence of marijuana, possession, and paraphernalia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Use the board. What's on the floor right now is an amendment that takes the fine in the ordinance that's proposed from $250 to $500 for both private and public use. A yes vote increases the fine to $500 from the ordinance. All right. So that passes on a vote of 8-4. So now we're back to the ordinance with the amendment, and the attorney went over the ordinance. Alderman Van Lees, did you want to speak to this again, or did you never really have taken your light off? Okay, do you want to take your light off then, because that cues things up here. All right, Alderman Scannell. This is on the ordinance.
Yep. Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to just cover a little bit what this all about, how this all came about. It started with a conversation with the community, and initially I was going to push as hard as I could to relax our marijuana laws, decriminalize as far as we could get it to go. But in talking with staff and with the police and the judge, I came to realize that there were consequences for, in effect, nullifying the law. If we stripped the law of all consequences, or such consequences that, in effect, the law is pretty much not practiced, that's the same as legalizing it. And that would be wrong and irresponsible for this council to do. When legalization comes someday, it also needs to come with regulation. And we lack the power to do that. So to decriminalize the law to the point of nullifying the law would be irresponsible. So I looked at our law, and it needed revising. This law needs revising, out of fairness. This is what this law says about us as a community. Our law is that the second offense would automatically go to criminal court. Is just that's unjustifiable. Why we take that discretion from our officers, I don't know. I want to empower our officers. To just systemically do this is inappropriate and irresponsible. I think it says it's not fair. For drunk driving, it's your 4th offense, and if it happens, it needs to happen within 5 years of your 3rd offense before you would lose your license. Your license would be suspended. So this law, it just automatically suspends your license, or can't just automatically suspend your license, even if it doesn't have anything to do with a moving violation. No other law does that. That's draconian. What's that even in there for? And as far as the fine goes, I would like to make it clear that we are still very high. All the other major municipalities, Milwaukee, Madison, Oshkosh, Appleton, Eau Claire, their fines are still well below $500. So we still have some teeth in our law. And as I said earlier, that number came by with a lot of hands, talk to the police staff, judge, the community. This was a work in progress for quite a while, and a lot of input from a lot of reporters, and this is what we came up with, and I think it's fair. And I think it's important to realize that one of the big pushes for this, I think the moral imperative for this, is medicinal use. We've really put some people between a rock and a hard place where they have to choose between relief from their symptoms or breaking the law. I think it's grandma who's smoking for her glaucoma, or a child smoking to relieve seizures. I think to threaten the parents and grandma with a felony after the second charge and up to a $1,000 fine is not fair, is not just. I mean, the state law does not differentiate between recreational and medicinal, and neither can we under state law. So it's all in one pile. So I think, given current circumstances and given the current environment where all around us it's being legalized, this is an issue that's not going to go away. It's going to affect us. I think decriminalizing our laws and making it more fair is appropriate and the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. We're talking about the ordinance. Anybody else want to speak to this? We're going to vote on it. Use the board. This is to approve 2718, which the city attorney went over. Okay, and that passes on a vote of 8-4. All right. Thank you. Clerk, let's continue.
Report of the Protection and Policy Committee granting operator licenses.